our team walked them through every homicide offense and also presented all of the information that was available to the grand jury. And then the grand jury was ultimately the one that made the decision about indicting Detective Hankinson for wanton endangerment. I think that in terms of what happened the wee hours of March 13th, in terms of that particular or specific date and what happened that night in the apartment, I think it is unlikely that there will be any additional prosecutions that come from that event itself.
Welcome to Law and Crime Report, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. That was Kentucky AG Daniel Cameron talking about the Breonna Taylor case. Breonna Taylor, of course, the Louisville EMT who was gunned down in her very own apartment during a controversial raid. Let's just do a reset if we can. So as you heard, Brett Hankinson faces charges of wanton endangerment. Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, who opened fire into Taylor's unit, he himself had been shot. He has not been terminated from the force, but the most recent news, the update that we have for you, is that we have learned that two other officers involved in this shooting, Miles Cosgrove and Joshua Janes, they have been informed that they will be terminated. The process is being put forward right now. Now, Cosgrove is the one who fired the bullet that actually struck and killed Taylor, while Janes was the one who obtained the search warrant. Let's break this down. I'm joined right now by criminal defense attorneys Tiffany Simmons and Joseph Lowe. I'm so happy to have you both here because we have a lot of topics to get to. Let's start with Breonna Taylor. And Tiffany, I want to start with you. Legally, what is the rationale for both of these officers to be fired, and what is your reaction to it?
Well, let's start with my reaction. I am elated that they are going to be fired because they did the wrong thing. Legally, the intent to terminate these two officers is because they violated the standard operating procedures, one for Detective Janes on getting the search warrant for Breonna Taylor's apartment, and then, of course, Miles Cosgrove for being the actual person who shot Breonna Taylor dead. So I am elated to see that they are now fired because I have always stated from jump that Breonna Taylor should be here, that these officers, all of them involved in this no-knock warrant, executed in the wrong place. They violated the standard operating procedures, and they should be held accountable.
Tiffany, I'll go back to you on this question. Again, the timing of this. Why is this happening now?
Well, if we want to be honest, it's probably something political involved. Again, these officers should have been fired when this incident first happened. So, my short answer is it's probably something behind the scenes that is going on that we don't know that has affected this case and caused for the intent to terminate these two officers.
All right, I think we have Joseph back with us. Joseph, I want to give you an opportunity to jump into here. What's your reaction to this? And again, why do you think this is happening now at this point in the case?
Same reason everybody else thinks it's happening or knows it. It's because it's political. The power structure, the government is dependent upon the voters to stay in power. And so somebody, we know who's making a move to say, look at me. I'm finally doing the right thing with the way we've been running the police department, which is our strong arm branch of the power structure. They want to stay in power. They want to come into power, and they want to use this as a way to say, hey, we're on board with everybody else. Better question to ask is, why wait so long? Why not 5 years ago? Why not train the officers? Why not do it 10 years ago? Why you've been systematically training them to act in this way for decades? When we start asking those questions, now more people will be held accountable. There'll be more change.
Joseph, I want to stick with you for a second because there's an interesting aspect of this. Let's start with, let's just focus right now on Cosgrove firing that bullet. You're going to have a termination hearing to where, it's ultimately happens that he'll be terminated because of this. But yet at the same point, the AG said that this was a justifiable use of force. So how do you have this where he's being fired for it, and yet the highest lawman in the state is saying what he did was okay?
Well, the highest lawman in the state didn't get there without his complete commitment of being a company man. All right. That is what has been going on for decades, where the government whitewashes everything that their strong arm department does and say it's okay. Finally, someone's willing, and it appears it's lower down the chain, to stand up and say, we need change. We cannot keep doing this. Clearly, the officers acted wrong. Clearly, they violated policy. Clearly, they violated laws. Now we're finally going to see some people finally have enough courage to go against their power structure and say, you know what, we can't have this continue to go on. So the reason why they whitewashed it up on the top is because that's what they always do. But keep in mind this key: the police lobbying, or if you will, the union that they have, is incredibly strong, very. And so they are oftentimes behind what happens to the officer or what does not happen. So that's why they're going to have this hearing, because the union's at play here as well. And that's a powerful entity as also.
And you're seeing this disagreement, which we're talking about. So let's just go back to Daniel Cameron when he was talking about how Cosgrove, in his mind, was reasonable and justified.
With a thorough and complete knowledge of all evidence collected in this case, lawyers with our Office of Special Prosecutions presented the findings of our independent investigation before a grand jury comprised of Jefferson County residents beginning on Monday and concluding today. In Fletcher v. Graham, the Kentucky Supreme Court said that the grand jury has competing but balanced functions. On the one hand, its purpose is to investigate allegations of criminal conduct and determine if there is probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed. On the other, the grand jury serves to protect the public against unfounded criminal prosecutions where probable cause is lacking. The grand jury is unique in our criminal justice system because it operates independent of the court and the prosecutor. The hallmark of the grand jury is its independence from outside influence. This independence is necessary to ensure that justice is done both for the victims and for the accused. After hearing the evidence from our team of prosecutors, the grand jury voted to return an indictment against Detective Hankinson for 3 counts of wanton endangerment for wantonly placing the 3 individuals in apartment 3 in danger of serious physical injury or death. The charge of wanton endangerment in the first degree is a Class D felony, and if found guilty, the accused can serve up to 5 years for each count. Kentucky law states that a person is guilty of wanton endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life, he wantonly engages in conduct which creates a substantial danger of death or serious physical injury to another person. My office is prepared to prove these charges at trial. However, it's important to note that he is presumed innocent until proven guilty. During the last 6 months, we've all heard mention of possible charges that could be brought in this case. It's important to understand that all the charges that have been mentioned have specific meanings and ramifications. Criminal homicide encompasses the taking of a life by another. While there are 6 possible homicide charges under Kentucky law, these charges are not applicable to the facts before us because our investigation showed, and the grand jury agreed, that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire.
And to clarify that, none of the officers involved have been criminally charged in relation to Breonna Taylor's death. Brett Hankinson is being charged in relation to firing those rounds that went into an adjacent or a nearby apartment. That's what's interesting here. Now, Tiffany, over to you. It seems like a foregone conclusion that these 2 officers will be terminated, but there's a hearing, there's an appeals process, and you're hearing from the defense attorneys kind of suggesting that, look, no matter what we do, they're going to be fired. This is, not real due process. But walk us through the actual logistics of this. Is it possible that the officers could not be terminated, that they might be able to convince whatever panel it is or an appeals process and actually be remain on the force?
Well, as we've seen in this case, anything is possible. It is a slap in the face that the officers were charged with wanton endangerment of a nearby apartment, but not endangerment or murder charges for killing Breonna Taylor. So it is very well possible that these officers are not fired after the hearings take place. One thing that struck out to me as procedural, or that they may not be fired, is the fact that one of the officers got an intent to terminate letter this past Tuesday, according to his attorney. Now, I've seen many jobs. I've had jobs in the past. I've seen people just outright fired and not necessarily sent a letter of intent to fire. So it is likely that they may not even be fired, but for the sake of Breonna Taylor, for her family, for the world, the community, United States, to see some sort of bittersweet justice, they need to be fired.
Now, let me ask you this, Joseph. Next steps, there were other officers who were involved in that raid. There were other officers as part of the narcotics probe that was being launched. The police department, hasn't released its professional standards unit investigation report. And so there's a question if other officers who were connected to what happened to Breonna Taylor could face some sort of repercussions. Is that going to happen?
That's a good question, too. And honestly, I got to be straight with you. I don't know. And here's why I don't know. If you asked me on any other case, would it be likely? I'd say absolutely not. In no way is the police department going to help in any kind of cooperation that would lead to more officers being accused, charged, and prosecuted and convicted. They're not going to do it. They usually are covering it up quite a bit. This is not accusation. This is factual if you look at the history. Now, specifically to this department, so far they're doing the right thing. So far they're systematically looking at it, investigating it, sharing the information, being transparent, and they are, to the best of their ability that I can see, trying to get something done. They are up against quite a bit of tradition and old school that normally whitewashes this whole thing. So I can't say, honestly, what they're going to do with those other officers, but your intuition's great, and that clearly something should be done because it was a team effort. And how do you only have two people accountable right now on what is a huge operation? They always are. It involves a lot of people to get one of those warrants and do one of those, knock and serves. So I don't know.
And look, depending upon who Mayor Fisher actually appoints to be the permanent police chief, maybe we'll see something happen there, and we'll obviously update our viewers about the next steps in the legal process of this case. We're going to take a break, though, but when we come back, we're going to update you about another big case, the Nashville bombing. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We have an update for you in that Nashville bombing that damaged dozens of buildings and left several people injured. Body cam footage has been released from the moments before, during, and after the explosion. Our very own Brian Buckmeyer has more of the story.
Nashville police officers headed down 2nd Avenue just after 6 a.m. on Christmas morning. The officers, hearing a warning from an RV about a possible explosion, went door to door warning people to evacuate.
So you're not doing anything wrong, okay? You're not in trouble, but there is something serious happening down the road.
The recording from the RV can be heard as the officers hurried past.
That's so weird. That's like something out of a movie.
Like The Purge?
Yeah.
At 6:29 a.m., the bomb went off. The sound captured on an officer's body cam.
423,
the site captured on street surveillance video. Those same officers suited up and rushed towards the scene. Debris covered the street as the RV continued to burn.
Okay,
No, my God.
where's your car? Okay, go to your car. What's going on?
The blast damaged more than 20 buildings and injured at least 3 people.
Boy 44, we need 47 is taking the Broadway for an officer that has hearing loss in his left ear.
Authorities identified 63-year-old Anthony Quinn Warner as the suspect. Warner died in the explosion. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation said detectives matched DNA found at the scene to Warner's hat and gloves. Those detectives now working to determine if Warner was paranoid about 5G and targeted the AT&T building.
Hey, man. Hey, go that way, man. Sorry, you're good. You just go that way.
Many in Nashville still searching for the why.
Dude, trust me, go that way. Please.
I saw it go off this morning.
I know it. Keep going that way. As far as y'all can.
It really is something out of a movie when you see that. And look, Tiffany, there's a lot to get from that body cam footage, but what did you make of it? Because for me, what struck me is this, it almost seemed that Warner didn't want to intend to harm anyone, that this was purposely parked where he parked it, wanted to, detonate it, but didn't want anyone else to get hurt as a result of his actions. What did you make of the body cam footage?
Well, I respectfully disagree. He did want to hurt people, or else he would not have created bombs and let them go off on Christmas morning. Although there were a lot of damage to buildings and only reported 3 people injured, he still set off a bomb that could potentially affected a lot more people than just himself. I thought that this was, a homegrown terroristic act. And it was very unfortunate that this happened on Christmas Day.
I mean, it's absolutely tragic. I'm not justifying or excusing anything like that. I'm trying to understand what caused this. And, Joseph, you look at the motive here. There was a fear over the 5G technology parked outside of the AT&T. There was that loud sound, evacuate, stay clear of the vehicle. We will not know what the motive is because he died. What do you make of it? Because as we look at this body cam footage, we're getting more of the story.
With the little that we have, I make the following, and that is that he was probably a paranoid schizophrenic. They're going to get his mental history and his background. However, people who have that disease oftentimes will be very paranoid about technology, especially ones they believe are putting microchips in their head. I know it sounds crazy. However, that is a common phenomenon with that disease. When you couple that with the fact that he did it very, very early in the morning when there's very few people in an area of town that isn't congested, and he had some warnings and some stayaways, that tells you that it's not some person who is angry at the white society or, if you will, the capitalistic religion. It's somebody who is afraid of something else, but it's not people. He's not trying to kill as many people as possible, because if he was, he'd have done it at a different time, in a different place, maybe at a church where there was a huge mass. There's so many other choices for someone who actually wanted to hurt and kill people that it suggests to you this is somebody who is suffering from a type of.
So, Joseph, let me stick with you for a second on this, because there seems to suggest, could this have been prevented? Apparently, Warner's alleged ex-girlfriend had told authorities that this guy was making bombs, but yet he wasn't on the TBI's radar, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and I believe the FBI didn't have any records for him. So how is that possible when you have someone saying he's doing this, and all those months later, look what happened?
A lot of folks will fall through the cracks. A lot of the reason for that is the country's current attitude towards mental health. If you will recall, it was President Reagan who decided, oh no, we're not going to pay for people who cannot care for themselves anymore due to mental diseases. We're going to dump them all on the streets and let society deal with them. And that attitude towards mental health has been pervasive since this time. So what does that mean today? That means today you do not have a organization, a government entity, folks committed to the idea of looking for folks like this man with mental diseases and understanding what is likely to come when they have these diseases and show these symptoms, and having a way to process them, work with them, treat them, get them into a facility where they're safe or they're not as harmful to others. We did away with all that because people want to be angry instead and say, oh, I don't want to pay for things like that. That's the problem. And it's a small group of people when you consider the huge population of the country, this is how it happens. And it's unfortunate and sad. We lost a life, and we're no further understanding how to stop the next one from happening.
Yeah, hopefully. And look, the thing we can be grateful for is that nobody was killed, other than obviously the bomber, but nobody was killed. Nobody. It looks like maybe the three people would recover from their injuries. And property damage is property damage. It's awful, but this could have been a lot worse. And yeah, it's just an eerie case all around. I want to switch gears to something that is really near and dear to probably true crime fans. The Texas woman who was convicted of tying her naked husband to the bed and stabbing him to death is going to be released from prison today. A jury found Susan Wright guilty of the 2003 murder of her husband, Jeff, but after 16 years behind bars, she was granted parole this past summer. And true crime fans may remember her 2004 trial, including the moment when the state reenacted the vicious killing on a bed. This is a story that literally we talked about being from the movies, literally out of a horror movie. Joseph, I'm going to stick with you. I think we're working on getting Tiffany back, but Joseph, I want to stick with you. Oh, okay, we do have Tiffany. So Tiffany, I'll go to you on this. She originally gets 25 years in prison. Then she was granted a new sentence of 20 years after it was determined her attorneys provided ineffective assistance. Is it fair that she kills another human being and is being released from prison?
No, it is not fair. And surprisingly, as a criminal defense attorney, I am saying that it's not fair. This woman stabbed her husband 193 times. 193 times, not to mention the fact that she tied him to a bed. I think that she should serve her full sentence.
Well, I don't understand. Tiffany, I'll stick with you. I don't understand. Like, what happens now? What's the process for her being released? What are the conditions put on her? I'm assuming she just can't go out and do whatever she wants to do. She has to be monitored. I mean, the ideas of a convicted murderer being on the streets, what happens now? How do they monitor her, and what are the repercussions if she does something illegal? How does it work?
Well, she's going to be on parole, supervised. According to reports, it is going to be a supervised release where she does have strict guidelines that she has to adhere to. Now, with any criminal case where a person is paroled or let out on early release, they have to adhere to certain rules and regulations. And if they do not adhere to that, they will have to go back and serve out the remaining of their sentence. Now, with Susan Wright, we are unsure of what her guidelines will be. But again, with a murder charge, I do not believe that she should have any sort of early release, especially the circumstances regarding this. If it was maybe a self-defense or, stabbed him once or twice and he died, that I can possibly consider. But this murder appears to be calculated, appears to be planned out. And if I were in Texas, I would fear having this woman on the streets.
Look, I remember back in the day that she said that she was being abused, and this was kind of the way to end that. Joseph, Susan's family sent out a statement or a message that says, I think she's paid her debt to society and deserves a second chance. Will she get a second chance? What do you make of that?
Well, I guess that depends on who her next date is as to whether she's going to get a second chance. I'll tell you this. When somebody stabs someone 193 times, I think that's a pretty good example of one scorned, or a woman that's scorned. And clearly, there was a lot more going on there than we know about right now. And the prosecutors acted that out in the courtroom. But I will say this. Texas is infamous in this country for having the most punitive, the most angry, the most punishing sentences for violent crime. In fact, they have put more people to death under the death penalty than any other state. So Texas doesn't take it lightly. Why are they giving this woman a second chance? Is because I believe it has a lot to do with the circumstances of the relationship. And when you stab somebody 193 times, that's someone who clearly is emotional and has lost their ability to stay in touch. So then the people on the parole board have to figure out, is that a one-time kind of act, crime of passion, Or is that systematic or an idea shot into something worse going on? And they made the decision that it is not likely to happen again. Although for the rest of us, we'll sit back and, I guess, place bets on the side as to whether it will or will not. But do I believe that people are in
Well,
danger
I
as a
mean, I
result?
hope not. I hope it doesn't happen again. That's a frightening thought to think about, Joseph.
That's
And
Right.
I would say, I think
full.
today's just a little bit of a weird day because we have a convicted murderer who's getting out. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a convicted murderer who may serve out the rest of his sentence, not in America, but his home country of Italy. We'll be right back, right after this. Over to Ohio now. Officer Adam Coy has been fired for shooting to death Andre Hill. The public safety director cited an unreasonable use of force by Coy, failure to turn on his body camera, and not providing life-saving efforts to Hill. Now, officers had responded to a call of a man sitting alone in his car, maybe turning the lights on and off, and Hill reportedly walked out of the garage unarmed. However, he had his cell phone in one hand, in his left hand, and in the right hand, this has been a point of controversy, was it concealed or not concealed? Could you see it or not? Now, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation has launched a probe into the shooting, and we're going to see what happens next. Tiffany, I'll start with you. What do you make of the latest development of the officer being fired?
I think that is absolutely the best thing to do at this point. That is the first step to getting some sort of justice for Andre Hill. My condolences to his family, and he should get justice. There was no weapon found at the scene of the shooting, and there is not a law against having your hand concealed and a cell phone in one hand. So what did he do? What did he do to deserve the death penalty in his own driveway? It is unfortunate that we see another case of a apparent innocent person, a black man being murdered by the police just because of what? This officer, Adam Coy, he did not try to de-escalate the situation. All he did was be the judge, jury, and executioner for a man that should be here with his family today.
Joseph, we also learned that another officer was at the scene, says she didn't see any kind of deadly threat posed by Hill. It becomes a question, how difficult is it going to be to defend this man if charges are ultimately brought against him? Because we've seen cases before where officers claim that they saw a weapon. I mean, the report is that Coy said there's a gun in his other hand, there's a gun in his other hand. If he legitimately believed that, but yet another officer at the scene didn't see that and didn't see a threat, how successful could a defense be for him if he's ultimately charged?
Well, how could they defend him? Or, in other words, how could they win the defense? Well, you could just look to the Rodney King case for an example of that, where you get a bunch of former officers on the jury, if you will, out in a place where they all retire to. Or you go with the typical defense they always go with, which is, well, he was afraid. He was frightened by the black man. And if he's frightened, he's allowed to do whatever he wants to, because that's what they sell. That's the story they sing every single time, which is, oh, he's afraid. And until we drill down and just take it apart, and you see that there are training and policies and procedures that if you truly are afraid, you're to do these other things before you take your gun out and kill somebody. And if the other person escalates the situation and gets more violent, then you're warranted using deadly force. But clearly there was none of that here. So will the defense be successful? Well, I guess that depends on who the judge allows in for the jury.
And maybe I'm a little premature because, Tiffany, no charges have been filed against him, right? And the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation is looking into this. What happens next? What are they ultimately looking for? What could be the charges here? How does this process work?
Well, it does take time to investigate. So I'm sure that they're going through the internal process to investigate the officer's claims. And especially if you have the other officer at the scene saying a totally different story. My hope, of course, is that the officer the officer that shot Andre Hill is charged with murder, because again, there is nothing illegal about coming out of your garage with a cell phone in your hand. There is nothing illegal about having your hands in your pocket. We have to look back at the phone call that was made that brought these Ohio officers to his home. It was a nonviolent emergency. So if you are called for a nonviolent emergency, why are you the one bringing deadly force? Deadly force was not reasonable, and Officer Coy should be charged with murder.
Well, listen, like you said, it's early. We're going to see what ultimately happens, how this is going to unfold. But right now, he has been fired. That is the first step, and we'll see where it goes. Before our last break, I had mentioned that we dealt with a case of a convicted murderer being released. Now let's talk about a convicted murderer who may no longer serve his sentence in America. Italian filmmaker Enrico Forti, he was convicted of the 1998 murder of Anthony Pike, and he's been serving a life sentence in Florida prison for the past 2 decades. He may now finish his time in his native land of Italy. Governor Ron DeSantis conditionally approved the transfer, which was at the request of the Italian government and the DOJ, which have been, I got to tell you, at odds and pushed him at odds and put him at odds with the state prosecutors. This is very interesting, Joseph. I know we've seen things like this happen before, but what is the rationale for a man who was convicted of murdering another human being in America to serve the remainder of his sentence in his homeland of Italy? And I know there are a lot of voices in Italy. There's a lot of people who believe that he's innocent. There's been a lot of attention to this. So there's a lot of support for him back home. But why would what's the rationale to send him back there?
The rationale is based upon a treaty that existed between this government, Italy and ours, and many other European governments long before Forti was convicted. That treaty or that law says that if you take in this case, Italian citizen, and you convict him in your foreign country, United States, that we can make an agreement which allows that person, that convicted person, to serve out their sentence in the country of their origin. Now, what could be one of the reasons behind why they made that law? It is because now the Italian government is paying to incarcerate that person. It is not cheap to keep any one person housed, fed, medicared for, etc. It is expensive. And so why shouldn't the Italian government pay for that person's incarceration? Another question could be, if you want to keep them in the U.S. and take up that space and have that cost, then have the Italian government pay for it here in the U.S. But still, that's the rationale behind it.
Okay, let me ask you the million-dollar question here, Tiffany. Miami-Dade State Attorney Catherine Fernandez-Rundell said she hopes that the justice is truly served and that the Italian government will fulfill their promise to the administration that Forti will serve the entirety of his remaining Florida prison sentence. My question is, how can we guarantee that if he goes back to Italy, he's going to remain in prison for the remainder of his life?
Well, here is your multi-million-dollar answer. He probably won't. If you have a country, if you have a country that is willing to accept back convicted murderer, because although he's an Italian citizen, that doesn't negate the fact that he was convicted of murdering someone. Now, again, the transfers to other countries, they are very uncommon. So it begs the question, why this person? Why now? Why this particular case? Again, it may be something political, but again, there's your multi-million-dollar answer. He probably won't serve out the remainder of his sentence.
I don't know. Now, one murderer going to be on the streets, another murderer going back to their homeland, maybe going to be on the streets there. I don't know. The law is a very interesting thing, and that's why we cover it. Listen, when we come back, our final story is something that, when I first heard it, I have to tell you, is probably one of the most disturbing, craziest cases I've heard in quite some time. So stick around. We'll get into it right after this. And welcome back, everybody. Finally, I want to talk about a case. It's a case, honestly, that I've never heard anything like this before. Let's go to Missouri. James and Mary Mast are parents who have faced child endangerment and domestic abuse charges for their alleged role in the death of their 4-year-old daughter, but they say that another pair is really to blame. And Jeanette Levy has more.
Criminal complaints for the 4 adults charged in this case paint an absolutely horrifying picture of what was going on in that house. According to the father of the children, his neighbors beat his 4-year-old daughter because they believed she was a demon.
The only thing we have is what they're telling us, and they were doing it in the name of discipline. You know, disciplining the family was their quote. There's a huge difference between discipline and beating.
Now, Sheriff Eric Knox calls this the worst case he's seen in his career. The criminal complaints state that Courtney Amon and Ethan Mast started beating members of the Mast family 5 weeks ago with a belt and a wooden spoon. Sheriff's deputies found James and Mary Mast's 4-year-old daughter dead on December 20th after James called 911. James told deputies the neighbors convinced him this was, quote, a God thing. James said his neighbors beat him, his wife Mary, and their 4-year-old daughter, and also their 2-year-old son, and that he allowed it to happen and shouldn't have fallen for it. The 4-year-old and Mary were also dunked in an icy pond.
You know, one or more of them were fanatics. Like I put in my Facebook post, you know, this is an isolated incident. You know, some people tried to say that this was the cult because they used the word demon. And obviously, demon and God in the same sentence, you know, would cause speculation for, you know, imaginations to run wild. But there's no evidence of anything other than this family and, you know, well, basically 2 families.
Now, there are a laundry list of charges for all of the people charged in this case. Amon and Ethan Mast face second-degree murder charges along with some other counts. And then the Mast family, they face charges of involuntary manslaughter and also some other charges. And more charges could be filed, we're told, Brian, after the medical examiner's report is complete.
All right. There's so much to talk about here. Joseph, let me start with you. I don't even know where to begin. I guess the idea, if we start with, by the way, no relation between James Mast and Ethan Mast, or Ethan Mast and Mary Mast, just adding to the weird complexities of this case. But the parents of the child, the idea that they were forced to do this, but they almost let it happen, yet they allowed themselves to be beaten. They allowed this to happen to their daughter. They're forced to do things to their daughter. Is that a defense for them? Let's stick with the parents first.
It's not a defense to everything, but what it really is something in legal terms we call a mitigation. Mitigation is a legal term meaning, well, it happened, but here's some reasons why. And the whole idea behind mitigation is so that you can fashion an appropriate sentence given the circumstance. Okay, that's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. What does the average person think about that? And it's just like you, Jesse, which is, who in their right mind would ever allow something so horrible and ugly and disgusting and cruel happen to somebody so young and innocent and helpless? And therein lies the question and the problem and the story, which we don't have enough facts to yet to figure out why they would do this and what was going on with them. But I'm going to guess you're probably going to find there's some drugs involved in there somewhere.
Well, Tiffany, I'm wondering at this point, are they, the parents, now saying, well, I can't believe what they convinced us of. I can't believe what they did. I'm going to testify against them. We were misled. We were duped. We were deceived. Or are they somehow suggesting this was what was happening? Our daughter was a demon. We had no choice. I can't tell if they're blaming these 2 other people, Mast and Amon, or not. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it could be a little bit of both. In any criminal case that, you know, has multiple defendants, there is going to be the blame game. They're going to say that, you know, others were the culprits or others forced us to do these things. What I see when I look at this It could be possible drug involvement. It could be possible mental health situations involved in this. And also, we could, as we're seeing, the extremes of people believing in some sort of religion. I don't know what this religion is, but when you're mentioning, God and my kid is a demon, whatever your belief system is, to do an act as harmful as hurting a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, as well as allowing yourself to get beat, there is some extreme cult-like behavior going on. And it's very unfortunate. And then to ask to be released to attend the funeral of the child that you allowed to be murdered, that's a slap in the face, and it's disgusting.
Joseph, when I first read the case, I was reading about the parents and how they weren't charged with murder. They're with child endangerment and domestic abuse, and they're blaming these other people, and I thought that was going to be it. But the fact that these two other people have been charged with murder, assault, and sexual abuse signifies to me that the authorities believe this story. The authorities believe that Mast and Ammon were in the driver's seat, that they're the ones who are responsible for the death of this girl. So the fact that they are charged with murder, the parents are not, what does it tell you about where the prosecutor's mind is at this point?
It tells me that he or she is listening to the head investigators on this case. Now, clearly, experienced law enforcement are used to, like you heard was said, the blame game, and they are very well trained on how to go out and have to corroborate or find supporting physical evidence that shows that the blame has some reality or some fact to it. So that must have been done, because usually a prosecutor is not going to charge some additional people on the blame game only unless there is corroborating or supporting evidence. And since those additional charges with these two new people are substantially more serious than the other two, tells me that there was significant supporting evidence to show and prove that those other two actually did do what they're being accused of, or at least they have good evidence to be able to argue that point. So I think that's probably what's going on.
And Tiffany, is the state right now also trying to figure this out as well? Are they looking at Ethan Mast and Courtney Ammon saying, well, do they actually believe these kinds of religious thoughts that there was demons and they had to do this? Or are these two incredibly sick individuals that wanted to see a 4-year-old beaten, sexually abused, drowned in a pond? They wanted to see that. And the way they did that was convincing these parents of the religious motivation. They convinced them of this, that there was a God willing them to do that. I can't tell if investigators at this point are trying to say, well, do these two people actually believe this, or are they really sick and just tried to manipulate parents?
Well, I think that's more a question of the defense attorneys for these 4 individuals that's going to be charged. I believe the investigators on the case may have looked into the reasons why, etc. However, as was stated earlier, the mitigating factors as to why this has happened will probably be investigated more by the defense attorneys for these 4 individuals, more so than the investigators and those that are charging them with these crimes. Because at the end of the day, the crimes were committed. The reasons why, of course, that will come out later as this case progresses.
I've never seen anything like this. I've seen child abuse cases before. Those are always complicated. They're always disturbing when you see that the parents or the caregivers are responsible. But to now bring these 2 other people involved and that you were forced to do it, there's a religious motivation. And we're trying to make sense of something that really you cannot make sense of. And it's a tragic story, and we'll see which way it ultimately goes. Joseph Lowe, Tiffany Simmons, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate everyone out there for tuning in to Law and Crime Report. We're always daily at 12 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you next time.